Have you ever looked at a painting and felt like it was almost hiding something? Like there's like a secret right there on the surface, but you can't quite, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Some paintings just, they draw you in, and the more you learn about them, the more layers you uncover.
And that's exactly what I'm hoping we can do today with this deep dive. We're tackling Georges Seurat's A Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte.
It's a painting that can seem so simple at first glance, but trust me, there's a lot more going on beneath the surface.
And we're going to unpack it all, right?
Yeah.
Like we're going beyond just, oh, pretty picture. We're talking about the technique, the history, even the social commentary that Seurat's subtly weaving into this scene.
And don't even get me started on Seurat's process. It was revolutionary for its time, this technique he used called pointillism.
Okay, so pointillism. For those of us who haven't had, our art history 101, break it down for us. What are we even looking at here?
Well, imagine instead of, mixing your paint on a palette, you're applying these tiny dots of pure color directly onto the canvas. So it's like you're building the image dot by dot, color by color.
That sounds incredibly tedious.
It was. A Sunday on La Grande Jatte, this massive painting. It took Seurat 2 years to complete. 2 years.
2 years. Okay, so clearly this wasn't just like a hobby for him. He was really dedicated to this technique. But why? Why go to all that trouble?
He believed, and I think he proved, that by separating the colors like this, not blending them on a palette, he could create a much more vibrant and luminous effect. It's all about how our eyes perceive those individual dots of color.
So there's this whole science to it, right? It's like he's almost hacking our visual system.
He was really interested in color theory and the work of scientists who studied how we actually see color. He believed that by putting these complementary colors right next to each other, but in these tiny dots, he could actually create an even more intense visual experience.
It's like tricking our eyes into seeing more vibrancy than traditional painting methods could achieve.
Exactly. And this is where the contrast with the Impressionists, who are also really into light and color, is really interesting. The Impressionists, they use these loose brush strokes to capture a fleeting moment. But Seurat, he was after something much more structured, more calculated with this technique.
So instead of a quick impression, it's almost like he's creating a hyper-reality, like a heightened sense of light and color.
Yes. And to do that, he was so methodical. We have that study he did for La Grande Jatte. It's in the Met now. And it's not just a sketch. This guy, he mapped out the whole composition, where every single figure would go, the light, the shadows, everything.
Wow, so this wasn't just a Sunday in the park for him. It was a full-on research project.
Absolutely. And you can see that meticulous planning in every inch of the final painting. But here's the thing. The location of La Grande Jatte itself, it wasn't just some random park. This place, it had its own, let's just say, reputation.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Spill the tea. What's the story with La Grande Jatte? This island, La Grande Jatte, what was it like back then? Like if I could hop in a time machine and visit, what would I see?
Well, for Parisians in Seurat's time, La Grande Jatte, it was a bit of an escape. You could leave the city behind, all the crowds and the noise, and just enjoy a little bit of nature.
Kind of like a park, but with an island vibe.
Yeah, exactly. Although, I say escape, but La Grande Jatte also had a bit of a, let's say, a colorful reputation.
Okay, so maybe not as peaceful and innocent as Seurat's painting makes it seem.
Right, and Seurat, being the observer that he was, he picks up on some of that underlying, let's call it complexity in his work.
You mean like those hidden details you were talking about?
Exactly. Like, remember that woman with the fishing pole, the one who seems to be fishing on dry land?
Yeah, it's like, what is she doing?
Well, some art historians think she's actually a subtle nod to the area's association with, well, prostitution.
Oh, wow. See, I never would have gotten that just from looking at the painting.
It's one of those things that once you know a little something about the context, it adds a whole new layer to the work.
Totally. It's like Seurat's, he's inviting us to look closer, to think a little deeper about what we're actually seeing.
And it's not just about, hidden meanings. It's also about who he chooses to include in this scene. Notice how he brings together people from all different social classes.
I did notice that, yeah. You've got like the wealthy couples all dressed up, and then right next to them are people who look like they're, I don't know, maybe workers taking a break.
Exactly. He's capturing this whole cross-section of Parisian society, like a snapshot of everyday life.
So like a time capsule almost.
Yes.
But then there are those details that they almost feel random, like they don't quite belong. Like, why a monkey on a leash?
But even that's a clue about the social dynamics at play. You see, back then, having an exotic pet like a monkey, it was a sign of wealth and status.
Oh, so it's not just a cute animal, it's a status symbol. It's
Yeah.
like Seurat sneaking in these little hints about power and social hierarchy.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have that little girl in the white
Yeah,
dress.
yeah, the one staring right at us. She kind of creeps me out a little, to be honest. It's like she's looking right through me.
Oh, she's definitely one of the most talked about figures in the whole painting. Some people, they see her as a symbol of innocence, surrounded by this complex adult world.
But she's also a little, I don't know, ominous. Like, is she judging us? Is that what that look is?
Right. And some people, they interpret her as representing the future, like she's gazing out at us, all these years later.
Like Seurat is making us think about how all of this moment he's captured, how it's going to echo into the future.
Exactly. And that just shows you how much thought he put into this. It wasn't just about creating a pretty picture. It was about, grappling with these bigger ideas about society, about how we see the world, about everything.
And he's using all these amazing techniques, like with the pointillism,
Hmm.
to get us thinking. Speaking of which, we have to talk about that zinc yellow he used. We touched on it earlier, but this is a big deal, right?
It is because unfortunately it hasn't stood the test of time quite as well as some of the other pigments he used.
So what you're saying is a Sunday on Le Grande Jatte that we see now,
Hmm.
it's not exactly how Seurat intended it to look. So this zinc yellow, this cutting edge color Seurat was so excited about, it's actually faded over time.
Yeah, it's a bummer, right? And to really understand why, we have to put our science hats on for a minute and talk about, the chemistry of paint. Some pigments, they're more stable. They can handle the light, the air, no problem. But others, like this zinc yellow, a little finicky.
Finicky, huh? In what way?
Well, over time, that exposure to light, to the air, it can actually cause some pigments to, they'll darken or even shift colors. And unfortunately, this zinc yellow, it was known to be especially sensitive.
So what we see today when we look at La Grande Jatte, it's like a faded photograph almost. Like we're not seeing the true colors Seurat intended.
It's a little bit like that, yeah. The greens, those yellows he used, they would have been even brighter, more luminous back in Seurat's day.
I'm trying to picture it like almost glowing.
Exactly, almost this shimmering quality to the light, kind of otherworldly. It's a shame, but even with that color shift, a Sunday on Le Grand Jatte, it's still just a stunning piece of work.
It really is. I mean, you could just feel the energy coming off of it even now. But okay, before we wrap up, I got to ask, how did this masterpiece end up all the way in Chicago? I mean, it's a long way from Paris.
It is. A Sunday on La Grande Jatte found its way to the Art Institute back in the 1920s, and we can thank a woman named Helen Birch Bartlett for that.
And she was.
Oh, she was a huge art lover, a serious collector, and she had a real eye for groundbreaking work. She totally understood the significance of Seurat's work, even back then when a lot of people, they didn't get it,
He was ahead of her time.
Exactly. And luckily for us, she was really influential, and thanks to her, she helped get Le Grand Jatte to the Art Institute.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like her love of art, it's had this ripple effect, and now, because of her, millions of people have been able to experience this painting firsthand.
And it's not just in the museum, right? La Grande Jatte, it's like this icon. It pops up everywhere.
Oh, yeah, it's true. It's in movies, even musicals.
Yeah.
Don't tell me there's a Le Grand Jatte-themed restaurant
Yeah,
somewhere.
there is a topiary garden in Ohio. But yeah, it's everywhere. Like that scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, remember?
Yeah.
When they're at the Art Institute, just mesmerized.
It's so good. It's like this painting, it speaks to people. It transcends time, generations even. And then, of course, you have to mention Stephen Sondheim. I mean, Sunday in the Park with George.
Such a good musical, and it really gets into Seurat's head, his process, the stories behind the painting. It's brilliant.
It really is. And I think it speaks to this broader fascination we have, like as a culture with Seurat and Le Grand Jatte. We're drawn to that mystery, to that beauty. It's right there on the surface, but also hidden in those details, that social commentary.
It makes you realize that Seurat wasn't just trying to create something that looked nice. He was challenging us to really look to see the world in a new way.
He was a visionary, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the way he used color theory, that meticulous technique, his observations of the world around him, it all added up to this huge shift in art history. I mean, he opened up this whole path for modern art.
Absolutely. And the best part is, there's still no right answer when it comes to interpreting a Grande Jatte. It's like he's still making us think all these years later.
It's a conversation starter, that's for sure. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into a Sunday afternoon on the island of Le Grand Jatte. but you know me, I like to leave you with something to chew on. You know researchers are doing some really cool stuff with technology, right? Like, they're able to digitally reconstruct the colors of old paintings to show us how they would have looked originally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So imagine seeing La Grande Jatte with those bright, those almost glowing greens and yellows that Seurat intended. It makes you wonder, what else haven't we uncovered about this incredible painting? What other secrets is it hiding?